And now a continuation of CHRONOMASTER by Roger ZELAZNY and Jane LINDSKOLD, as read by the Plurality Report. Chapter 8. Miriam was as slender as a lily stem, as graceful as a gazelle. Her wide eyes and long thick hair were both as dark as night, when pouting red lips that seemed created for kissing curved in a smile at him. René Corda found himself half in love with Arabu's daughter. "I am Miriam, daughter of Arabu," she said, gracefully offering Corda her hand. "You will ever have my gratitude if you help me find my beloved Tico and save me from the lusts of Dwister." Corda found the composure to bow over Miriam's hand. Her slender fingers, he noticed as he did so, were tipped with rounded nails painted a delicate coral. Miriam wore loose trousers gathered at the ankle and a tight half-blouse that showed off a very cute navel. "I will be honored to serve you, lady," he said, "but I must admit that Tico's gain will be the loss of every man in every universe ever created." Miriam giggled, and Corda found himself liking her as well as admiring her. He wondered what Jester would think of their new guest and dreaded that he already knew. Arabu had risen from his seat on the carpets to awaken Miriam, and now he took her arm.
"Daughter, I will give you a device so that you can wear bottled time like Corda and myself. However, you will have only 3 hours time with you, unlike René, who is equipped with almost twice that. You must listen to him and stay close. If he says to return to his ship, you must do so at once."
Miriam nodded obediently. "Yes, father, I will do as you say." Corda wondered at her apparent meekness. He suspected that there was steel in that graceful body. After all, she had the courage to resist the will of the ruler of the universe.
"Now, to your departure," Arabu said. "Among my carpets is one that has the power of flight knotted into its weave. René, you and Miriam shall take this carpet and fly to the top of the bottle. Once you are there, force the cork out and then fly directly up. Beware the jinn who maintain the sandstorm, for they will attempt to stop your flight. If they do, there will be no saving you."
Corda pushed inane questions about flying carpets and jinn from his mind. Hadn't he designed universes that contained things at least as far-fetched? "Very well, Arabu," he said. "There's just one more thing I need to do. I came to the northern deserts to use a device that will enable me to pinpoint the world key for this universe. I'm going to take a gamble that this bottle is where I must use it."
"This bottle?"
Arabu sounded astonished.
"Why should you think so?"
"Well," Corda said, starting to set up the resonance tracer, "it's in about the right place geographically. Secondly, you yourself admit that this section of the desert is known for its dangers. I suspect that the sandstorm and the bottle oasis are both meant to protect Auron's magnetic north." Miriam clapped her hands in glee. "Yes, I understand. First, one may not reach the place, then if one does, one is trapped within a bottle." "Precisely," Corda said, switching the tracer on. "That way, even if those with ill intent manage to get here, they can't escape with the knowledge they gain. You did say, Arabu, that the stasis occurred soon after your arrival here. The saboteurs must have slipped in and out past your tents while you were inside and out of sight."
"But how did these saboteurs escape?" Arabu said. "Certainly they did not have a flying carpet."
Corda watched as the resonance tracer etched the paths of the planet's magnetic field, then set it to read and record. He could transfer the data to Jester as soon as they were back to the ship. "No, I doubt they had a flying carpet," Corda answered. But I suspect they had plenty of time to research Aurans and learned enough to come prepared for both the storm and the bottle. Ereboo frowned and turned his blind gaze on his daughter.
You have formidable opponents, Renee Corda, he said. Perhaps Miriam should remain here where she will be safer now that we know that you will recognize Tycho.
Miriam stamped one pretty foot. I will not stay, father. Tycho could be in danger. If not from these saboteurs, then from Dwister. I could not rest for worrying. Ereboo gave a crooked smile, but he relented.
Actually, my daughter, the stasis would make certain that you rested undreaming, but I respect your determination. Go with Renee. Advise him and assist him even when matters do not concern your Tycho. He is here as the savior of our universe.
Miriam bowed and embraced her father. Corda, made a bit uncomfortable by the blind man's praise, folded up the resonance tracer. I have my reading, he said. Where is that flying carpet? Under Ereboo's direction, Miriam found the correct carpet among those scattered on the sands. It was large enough to carry 2 people easily, 3 if they didn't mind crowding. Its dominant color was a clear azure, but the arabesques that adorned it were every color in the rainbow. Corda stared down at this, hoping that he was not about to be the victim of an elaborate practical joke. You drive, Miriam, he said. I'll sit behind you and keep the gin away. Very well, Renee, she said, embracing her father and then taking a cross-legged seat at the front of the carpet. Corda placed a hand on Ereboo's shoulder. Thank you for your help, Ereboo, he said. I'll try to take good care of your daughter for you. Don't worry. Ereboo smiled his mysterious smile.
I shall not, Renee Corda, for after you depart, I shall turn off my bottled time and wait either for your return or for the return of time. Both will tell me of your success, and if neither comes, I shall wait undreaming throughout eternity.
Corda shivered slightly at the calm acceptance in the blind man's voice, but he kept his apprehensions to himself as he stepped onto the carpet behind Miriam and took his seat. All right, Captain, he said, trying to keep his tones light. Everything's secure for takeoff. Hold on to the edges of the carpet, Miriam advised. It will steady you until we level off. Corda did as she said, although he would have much preferred to put his arms around her slender waist. The thought was so distracting that they were airborne and rising almost before he noticed. That was easy, he exclaimed. This is a good carpet, Miriam said. I have directed it to pick up speed right until we come to the top of the bottle. When you see the cork, get to your feet and then prepare to push it loose. Corda did as she said, pleased to find that he had not completely lost the reflexes he had developed surfing over half a century before. He wished Miriam would turn and look at him, but the lovely girl kept her attention focused on directing the carpet. They reached the cork at speeds that Corda guessed were close to 50 miles an hour. He felt a momentary flash of fear that he would break something when his arms hit the cork, but the impact came before he could flinch. One moment the enormous mottled brown cork was looming overhead, the next he felt a faint bump and they were through. All around them the sandstorm swirled, but under Miriam's skillful piloting they flew safely within the eye of the storm. Above, a round blue patch of clear sky grew larger and larger. We will be out soon, Miriam shouted over the howling of the wind. Watch for the gin. Aye, Captain, Corda shouted back. They burst through a thin curtain of sand at the top of the storm and into the clear sky. Corda did not have time to cheer, for he was immediately aware that what he had taken for looming mountains in the distance were towering jinn right up close. There were 3 of them, broad-chested, muscular men clad only in flowing trousers, turbans, and brass armbands. The skin of their bare chests was painted with the emblem for the universe of Aurans, a double crest over a rising sun. Miriam attempted to steer the carpet over and between the two of the jinn, but the carpet was already pushed to its limit. They would pass within arm's reach of the nearest jinn. Aware of how foolhardy his action was, Corda leaned out as far as he could over the side of the carpet. He felt firm hands balancing him, but he hardly registered that they were Miriam's. His goal was the turban of the nearest jinn. Snagging the fabric with the tips of his fingers, Corda pushed the turban free. Outraged, the jinn forgot to reach for the carpet. It grabbed its turban and clamped it back on its head. Corda fell back onto the carpet and, incidentally, into Miriam's arms. The girl's blush only made her more beautiful. He was trying to apologize and free himself from her unintentional embrace when a shrill voice sounded beneath his ear. "Sugar Pop, here I've been worrying myself sick about you, and I find you rolling around with some hussy. Transmission cut off suddenly, and the PDA, which had been hovering forgotten at his shoulder since the last contact with the ship, rose indignantly into the air and sped off in the direction of the jester. Miriam stared at him, embarrassment forgotten. Corda managed to pull himself upright. He couldn't help but notice that Miriam looked no less lovely with her hair all tousled by the wind. "Renee, are you a sorcerer?" the desert girl asked. Sorcerer?" Corda shook his head. "No, I'm not, Miriam. I'm just a universe creator who is going to have to deal with a very, very upset AI. AI? Miriam looked puzzled. Artificial intelligence, Corda explained. My starship has a computer that is as intelligent as a person and as temperamental. She is sort of protective of me. Protective? Miriam smiled, her dark eyes twinkling. Is that what you call it? Very well, I will accept your words. Corda flushed. Can you take us to my ship? It's right down there. Hopefully Jester will let us aboard before our bottled time runs out. Miriam nodded, and they swooped down to park alongside the Jester. Corda had to beg and apologize, but Jester relented before he had to start unbolting manual access ports. Still, when he came aboard, the computer refused to talk to him except in response to direct commands, and no perky hologram had manifested to keep him company. Even as he settled Miriam into a guest cabin, Corda felt obscurely lonely. He fought the feeling while he set the navigation program to seek out the palace that Ereboo had mentioned. Even though it was a long shot, he set a secondary scanning program to look for the Whirlwind, Tico Higgins' ship. On one level of his mind, he knew that Jester, as his ship's computer, was aware of everything he was doing and had, in fact, probably made deductions based on that information. On a second level, Jester was his friend, a somewhat touchy person, an almost girlfriend. That second level made no sense, but that second level was what made him speak hesitantly to the air. Jess? No answer. Well, he hadn't really expected one. Jess, the young lady who is our passenger, is the daughter of a man named Ereboo the Trader. Ereboo gave me the means to get out of the center of the sandstorm, but there was a price. He paused, hoping Jester would ask what. The silence continued unbroken. The price was that I take his daughter Miriam with me, reunite her with her beloved, and arrange for their marriage. There is some need for haste in this, for Miriam has awakened the lusts of a powerful man, and if she is not safely married to her promised husband, this man may kidnap her for his harem. Corda listened. Was that a faint sound, perhaps a gasp of indrawn breath? Jess, I had to make the deal in any case. I couldn't stay in a bottle at the heart of a sandstorm until my bottled time ran out. I'll be honest with you, though, Miriam's problem touched me. I know I wouldn't want to be forced into captivity, not when my heart was given. He bit his lip. Had he overdone it with the flowery language? Usually Jester was a sucker for such touches. He ran a hand through his hair. The big shot came when I learned who Miriam's beloved is. I bet you'll never guess. Again he paused. Would Jester take the bait? He was opening his mouth to continue when Jester's hologram flickered into sight on the holopad. I can guess, boss, Jester said, her voice full of perky impudence. Tico Higgins, right? Corda grinned and sketched the hologram a salute. You got it, Jess. How did you figure it out? Jester grinned back at him. She still wore her Arabian Nights costume, but, perhaps in imitation of Miriam, she now wore cascades of bracelets and long earrings. I guess when I heard the girl sobbing in her cabin, praying to Allah that she find Tico and be saved from her terrible fate. Korda kept himself from bolting to check on Miriam. After going to all this trouble to reassure Jester that his interest in Miriam was only that of a rescuer, it would not do to show too much concern. Instead, he turned to Jester. Could you go and speak to Miriam, girl to girl, and reassure her that we will do our best for her? I hate to think of her alone in there, but I may not be the best comfort. Jester nodded happily. The navigation program has found a desert city called Palace Gate, but the palace itself may be shielded. Do you want me to ask Miriam where we should start? If you would, Jester, Korda said, leaning back in his command chair. I'll go take a shower and change. That storm drove sand into every crevice of my clothes and right into the tips of my boots. Jester drew her veil modestly across her face. I'll report audio only then, boss. Korda could only shake his head in response, but he was whistling as he headed off to the showers. Chapter 9. My father did not mean to mislead you, Miriam explained some time later as they conferred in the Jester's lounge, but the palace that most believe that they are seeing is a mirage. Explaining to one who has been blind from birth the idea of something that is seen but does not exist at that place is difficult. Tico and I never tried. Korda nodded. I understand why. So this mirage explains why maps of Aurans locate Dwister's palace on the fringes of Palace Gate, but my sensors find nothing there. Is it elsewhere in the universe? Miriam shrugged gracefully. I do not know where the palace actually rests. As far as I know, the palace cannot be reached by normal means. Only Dwister's trusted counselors know how to defeat the mirage. Was Tico one of those counselors? Did he tell you that secret? Jester asked. He was and he did, Miriam's mysterious smile reminded Korda of her father. However, we may not need that knowledge. Tico had a house in Palace Gate. Perhaps he is there or has left a message for me. Wouldn't he have left a message for you at your father's house? Korda asked. Father did not have a permanent address, Miriam said. As a trader, he preferred to wander. He trusted the murmurs of the marketplace to bring his news to him. Korda straightened. Well, we cannot waken everyone in the marketplace from stasis to find if Tico left a message for you. Let's start with Tico's house, and if we don't find anything there, you can tell us the secret to reaching Dwister's palace. Korda left the Jester hidden in the desert outside of Palace Gate. With Miriam as guide and Jester's PDA at his shoulder, he entered the city. As they walked, he pulled out the direction finder. What is that? Miriam asked. It's a device key to the readings I took at Magnetic North right before we left the bottle. I thought that since we were here, I would check to see if it gave me any sign of where Auron's world key is concealed. He looked in the direction of the flashing arrows pointed, then frowned. What's wrong, Renee? Korda tucked the direction finder back into his belt stealthily before answering. It seems to be indicating the palace, but that seems unlikely since you told me that the palace is not there. Miriam touched his arm lightly. Actually, what I told you was that the palace is concealed by a mirage. I do not know where it actually is. That seems to be straining at gnats, said Korda. Miriam wrinkled her pretty nose in disgust. That is a terrible image, Renee, but I understand its sense. All I ask you to remember is that in Aurans, magic is as real as sand and sun, but not nearly as omnipresent. My boots are already full of sand already. You can empty them when we get to Tico's house, or perhaps you can buy a pair of sandals. The fastest route to Tico's is to cut across the bazaar. All the merchants will be in stasis, Korda reminded her. Yes, I know, Miriam said. How could I forget when all around us the city is silent and unmoving? My ears ache from straining to hear the cry of the street runners, the plaints of the camels, the wailing songs of the people at prayer. Yeah, boss, Chester said. How could she? I apologize. If this bazaar is as crowded as it looked on my view screen, our passage may create a momentary ripple in the stasis. Miriam trembled slightly. We will seem like ghosts drifting through the sleeper's dreams. Perhaps, but more likely they will forget we have ever been there. As Arabu so aptly put it, the sleep of stasis is dreamless. Even with this reminder, their passage through the bazaar was quite eerie. Corda told Miriam and the PDA to stay within his area of effect in order to minimize the radius of the bottle of time. Even so, as they walked, all around them the merchants returned to their business for a few moments.
Pots mended, pots made, clay or glass or tin.
Sweet honey dates to tease your mouth. Melons so ripe, every one a pearl beyond price.
Cool water, iced wine, sherbets.
Sir, buy a bangle for the lovely lady.
Fortunes told, fortunes rendered. Why take a risk when you can know?
A few of the merchants, those who remained within the effect of the bottle of time the longest, or those who were most observant, noticed the uncanny silence that cloaked all but their area of the bazaar. Some, seeing Corda's outlander clothing or recognizing Miriam, called out. Corda gave no answer, nor did he permit Miriam to stop and talk. Even a few people within his radius could delay them, and he did not desire to awaken a riot. So they hurried along past booths, where vases and platters of polished bronze and copper gave the sun back its light, past shadowed tents in which cut gemstones glittered in the torchlight, and the sense of heavy incense teased them to linger. Passing one merchant's display at the edge of the bazaar, Miriam bent and scooped up a pair of broad-strapped black sandals. She tossed a silver coin embossed with a man's face into the sand in their place.
Ali does good work, she explained, and these look about your size. If you are not careful, those boots will give you blisters.
Kurda smiled his thanks. I'll put them on when we get to Tico's.
We are almost there, said Miriam, pointing to a solid adobe house.
The few exterior windows of Tico's house were keyhole arches, latticed with carved wooden screens, patterned with strange beasts and stranger people. Flowering shrubs blossomed in a multicolored border along the path that ran up to the door and continued along the front of the tile-trimmed wall. Miriam broke into a run and hurried up the walk. Seizing a door knocker shaped like a dragon, she rapped sharply. There was no answer.
Why do not the servants at least come? She fretted, rapping again.
Jester brought the smiling face of her PDA between Miriam's hand and the door when the girl would have knocked a third time.
Don't panic, Miriam, the computer reassured her. The servants are in stasis, just like the rest of ourans. Even if Tico came back, he would not have enough bottled time to keep them active. We had to fit the whirlwind with the unit so that he could leave herbs. I doubt that he had a lot to spare.
Miriam let her hand fall from the dragon's tail. Then she blushed, the rosy color doing marvelous things to her cheeks.
I have been a child, she said. I was so certain that Tico would be here that I did not think.
The PDA tapped her lightly on the cheek. Don't let it worry you. Humans don't think all the time. I could tell you stories about the boss. Corda decided it was time to interrupt. Miriam, do you know if Tico has a key or a pass card hidden somewhere? We could use it to go inside and see if he left any messages. Miriam nodded.
Yes, he kept a key hidden, she said, then inexplicably blushed again. He told me where in case...
So that you could get into his house in case of emergency, said Corda, keeping his face straight with effort. Unlike many girls he met on Earth, Miriam was clearly as young as she appeared.
That's right, she said, relieved. It's under a tile at the edge of the path.
Miriam dropped to her knees, her fingers questing beneath the fragrant shrubs.
It should be right about... A shriek interrupted her sentence. Corda caught a glimpse of something furry and golden blonde lurching from under cover of the shrubs towards Miriam. As it emerged, he saw multifaceted eyes, 8 strong jointed legs, and the wide flat body of a tarantula the size of a large dog. With an audible crunch, the golden tarantula bit Miriam. A second scream faded as Miriam collapsed into an unconscious heap on the tiled walkway. Then, while Corda gaped in astonishment, the tarantula started dragging the unconscious girl away toward the bazaar. The nimbus of her bottled time surrounded them both so that, ironically, Miriam was unwittingly assisting her assailant. Corda ran after them. Jester's PDA darted ahead to slow the spider by diving at its eyes. "Hurry, boss, hurry!" Jester cried. "Ugly 8 Legs is way too big for me to stop, and if it gets in that maze of tents, there will be no way for us to stop it without awakening most of the bazaar." Corda didn't waste breath answering. The tarantula might be preternaturally strong and swift, but Miriam's inert body was slowing it considerably. Pushing off from the sandy road, Corda leapt out in a flying tackle. He missed the spider, but grabbed Miriam in his arms. After a brief tussle, he pulled her away from the monster. With a spitting, hissing wail, the spider dashed under the edge of a tent and was gone. "Don't go after it, Jess," he called to the PDA. "All we would do would be to provide it with bottled time to flee in and, if it ran through the bazaar, start a riot." "Good thinking, Sugar Pop," Jester said. Sitting up in the middle of the street, Corda held Miriam. A quick check reassured him that she was still breathing, although each breath was dragged unwillingly from the heart of the deepest sleep Corda had ever observed. Beneath her eyelids, Miriam's eyes rolled relentlessly. Her sleep might be deep, but it was far from dreamless. Corda frowned. "You just can't keep your hands off her, can you, Sugar Pop?" Jester said, interrupting his thought. Corda looked up to see the PDA hovering at eye level. "Jess," he began, but the computer interrupted him. "Hey, just joking, Sugar Pop. Boy, you're too grim. How's the lady? If that spider killed her, I'm gonna..." Corda shook his head to dispel Jester's fear. "Miriam is alive, but the spider's poison put her under. Can you do anything?" "Not here," Jester replied. "On the ship, probably. Do you want to head back?" "Miriam doesn't seem in any immediate danger," Corda said, getting to his feet and adjusting his grip on Miriam. "We're awfully close to Tico Higgins' house. I'd hate to leave without seeing if he's there. Buzz on over there, my friend, and see if you can unlock the door." "Gotcha, boss." The PDA swirled once around his head, paused near Miriam's face, and then went to hover in front of the door. Corda followed more slowly, carrying Miriam gently. As he arrived, the PDA was opening its grinning mouth and extruding a delicate probe. "I can pick this one," Jester said. "It's a good lock. You might be interested in knowing that the maker is an herbs company, but it isn't better than me." "Ah, modest as ever, Jester," Corda said. "I'm modest, boss," Jester said, retracting her probe and bobbing up to smile in his face. "It's just that I'm honest, too. Give the door a shove with your toe. It should come open now." Corda did as directed. The door swung silently open into a tiled foyer at least 10 degrees cooler than the desert heat outside. Rich oriental carpets, piled with artistic disarray on top of each other, cushioned his feet as he walked. Keyhole arches led into rooms on the right and left. A spacious corridor to the back and a stairway leading up gave some sense of the size of Tico's house. Clearly, Dwister's trade minister was not wanting for material comforts. Glancing into the room on the right and seeing that it was furnished as a parlor, Corda carried Miriam in. He set the unconscious girl on a sofa and arranged her comfortably. Her eyelids still showed active dream patterns, quite at odds with the depth of her sleep. The PDA watched as Corda crossed to Miriam and turned off her bottled time. "Why did you do that, boss?" "If the poison from the spider bite could harm her, stasis will stop its spread. If it would work its way out naturally, then I have delayed her recovery but not halted it, and she won't feel the difference." Corda glanced around the room. "Also, with her time stopped, she is safe here. The spider could carry her away because she had time. If she hadn't accidentally awakened it when she was searching for the door key, it would never have harmed her." Good thinking, boss. The PDA sped to the doorway. Let's go talk to Tico. Considering his options, Corda turned to the waiting PDA. Jess, I want you to scat out the house. See if Tico Higgins is actually here, or if he left any evidence that he has been here since his return from Herbs. Remember what Miriam said about several servants, and do your best not to awaken any of them. The PDA bobbed once as if nodding. Gotcha, Sugar Pop. Don't get fresh with Miriam while I'm gone. Corda sighed. I won't. The thought never occurred to me. What I was planning to do was empty the sand out of my boots, put on my sandals, then see if that carafe on the side of the table holds anything cool to drink. Just checking, Jester said. Be back in a flash. She returned just as Corda finished pouring himself a goblet of imported wine, a Falernian, he was certain, brought from a universe called Roma that he had crafted when he was barely 150 and thought that he knew everything. He sipped the wine and listened to his computer's report. There are an old man and woman in the kitchen sitting at the table, Jester said. I think they were having a light lunch. Soft goat cheese and flatbread, good olives, pale green melon cut on the sideboard for dessert. Corda heard his stomach rumble. Ignoring it, he gave Jester a nod to continue. They were the only people on the ground floor, she said, so I went upstairs, and guess what? You found Tico Higgins, Corda said, taking a sip of his wine. He ran out of time while doing something here? The PDA bobbed gleefully. That's right. He's sitting at a writing table with a half-finished letter in front of him. I used my zoom lens so that I could read it without awakening him from stasis. He was writing to tell Miriam that he had returned from his trip to find Aurens in stasis. Since he hadn't been able to find her, guess what he was going to do? Corda hid a grin. He was going to leave Aurens and find us. Then he was going to bring us back to get Aurens out of stasis. If the PDA had been capable of expression, Corda was certain that it would have been bug-eyed with surprise. How did you know? Jester asked. Did you sneak upstairs while I was in the kitchen? Corda shook his head. No, I've been right here. I just guessed that Tico would have done the same thing I would in a similar circumstance. I'm delighted to see we think alike. Show me where he is. We can bring him out of stasis and up to date. Do you want me to go up and then bring him down here? Jester asked, deferential for once. No, Corda said decisively. If Tico feels as strongly about Miriam as she does about him, then the sight of her unconscious will drive all coherent thought from his head. Let's tell him about her predicament last. We only have a few hours worth of bottled time here. We can't waste too much on lovers' hysterics. Right, Sugar Pop. When they awakened Tico, he was startled to find them there, but not completely taken aback. As his unfinished letter had shown, he had considered the possibility that Corda might be interested in the problems of Aurens. Sketching a bow that included both the PDA and Corda, he reached for a tray containing bread and cheese that rested on his desk. You have twice been my saviors, he said solemnly, and I would formally offer you bread and salt. According to the customs of Aurens, this binds me to you as an ally, and if you wish, it makes us friends. Corda bowed in return. I would be honored, Mr. Higgins. Tico, the diplomat said with his bright smile. Tico it must be, if you accept my offering. Putting out his hand, Corda took the piece of bread and cheese, to which Tico had added a tiny pinch of salt. Tico it is, then, he said, but you must call me Renee. And me, Jester, the PDA said. Taking a bite from his own bread and cheese, Tico nodded happily. Now I can guess that whatever has put Aurens in stasis has brought you here, friend Renee. Tell me, what have you seen since your coming? Briefing Tico went smoothly until the dark-bearded diplomat learned about Miriam's presence and injury. Then nothing would do but for him to hurry down the stairs and... Boss, Tico's smart, but he is kind of impulsive, isn't he? Corda looked at Tico, stranded in stasis, a step outside the radius of Corda's bottled time. The diplomat's desert robes were flared in air, stirred by his passage, and then frozen in time. Perhaps Tico isn't as impulsive when Miriam isn't involved, Corda said, trying to be fair. But where her safety is concerned, common sense does seem to go out the window. How much bottled time do we have left? About 4 hours, boss. For you, maybe 1 for Miriam, even with you switching her unit off. We'll need to head back to the ship eventually, but I think we can finish our conversation here. Corda stepped forward and placed a hand on Tico's arm. Slow down, Higgins. You just carried yourself out of the range of my bottled time. We haven't recharged the unit you let run down earlier. Tico Higgins tugged embarrassedly at his beard.
Oh dear, I did, didn't I? I can't get accustomed to the idea that time has been switched off.
Remember it, Bud, Jester said. You keep running out of time in your hurry to save time. She giggled, and after a moment Tico joined her. The trio progressed to the lower floor at a more dignified pace. Tico paused in the doorway to stare longingly at his beloved, who slept like a princess in a fairy tale.
She is so lovely, he murmured. So strong, so wise, and so gentle. And her courage! She could have let you find me without endangering herself. But she is a lioness among women, my Miriam.
I think I'm going to be sick, the PDA muttered in Corda's ear. Hush, Corda said. Tico, if you come over by Miriam with me, you can sit within her bottled time after I reactivate her unit. That is, if you can bear sitting that close to her while she's still under the poison's effect. Tico looked shocked.
Bear to sit near her. I shall be the trellis on which my flower of the desert will lean. Not only will I be her support, I will be her spreading shade against the sun. Her...
Corda raised a hand. Tico, before I reactivate her unit, tell me one thing. Do you know anything about the effects of the bite of the blonde tarantula? The innocent question drained the blood from Tico's face. He leaned against the wall, stared blankly at Corda.
The blonde tarantula? He whispered. You said she had been made ill by a spider bite. You did not say that it was the bite of the blonde tarantula.
Corda looked at him. This, then, is a significant oversight on my part?
Slava! Tico hissed in reply. Slava! The blonde tarantula, the servant of Sheik Twister, he who rules the universe of Aurans.
This doesn't sound good, boss, Jester commented. Tico continued speaking as if he had not heard the PDA's word.
The first bite from Slava causes sleep, deep and filled with dreams of the torments suffered by sinners in the afterlife. The second bite, for all but a very few, brings death, and those few who live suffer insanity.
How do you know all this? Corda said. Could it just be conjecture? Rumor, hopefully?
Tico shook his head. Slava was a gift to Sheik Twister from Mad Merrywind Tatchet, the ruler of the universe of Verdry. In Verdry, what is insane is normal, and all that is normal becomes insane. I do not know why Merrywind Tatchet made this gift to Twister, but I do know most truly the effects of the blonde tarantula's bite.
Corda stared at him, dreading the answer that he knew must come. How do you know this, Tico?
I am a close servant of Sheik Twister, Tico said softly. There is a hierarchy among those who serve our all-powerful lord and ruler. The average citizens of Aurans do their jobs and live their lives below the burning glow of the twin suns. For them, life is much as it is elsewhere, although there is more of magic and order, and for many that is enough to make even a servant's tasks things of beauty. Those who further the will of Twister himself are ranked by what secrets they share, and no secret is more precious to Twister than the secret of the Palace Mirage. Those who know this are given the most important titles, the greatest wealth, the most fascinating duties, but Twister does not trust even these. If you are invited to enter the innermost circle of Twister's servants, you must seal your pact.
He stopped as if the words choked him. Corda finished for him. You must accept being bitten by the spider, Slava. If you do so, then he has a hold over you, for a second bite means death or insanity. Corda's voice dropped. What a horrid thing.
Yes, Tico said. The experience is more terrible than my poor eloquence can express. Now I learned that my darling, my desert flower, my sweet rescuing angel, is caught within those mad, mad dreams. And why?
We told you that Twister coveted her for his harem,
Corda said sternly. Apparently, when Dwister could not find her, he sent Slive to watch for her coming here. When the stasis fell, it trapped the spider, but Miriam accidentally awakened it. Tico stood straight, self-pity falling from him in response to the challenge in Corda's voice.
You are correct, Corda, as far as you speak, but you do not know the worst of it. Stories say that Slive and Dwister can communicate telepathically. If, in those moments when he was active, Slive contacted Dwister, then Dwister is warned of your presence here. Dwister may not know of your talents, but he trusts outsiders as little as Ditir of Herbs does. You must decide whether you will speak to Dwister before you continue your job here and reawaken Aurans.
Corda considered. I think my first job is to get you and Miriam back to the Jester. Once we're there, we can recharge your bottled time unit and Jester can see if she can whip up an antidote for Miriam. Then we can talk further about my goals.
And
plan a wedding, Jester piped up. Remember, boss, you promised Ereboo that when you found Tico, you'd arrange to get him and Miriam hitched. Corda rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands. Thanks, Jess. I just might have forgotten in all the other excitement. Very well, you find a way to awaken Sleeping Beauty, and I'll see what I can do about marrying her to her handsome prince. Chapter 10. It was quite possibly the strangest wedding that Corda had attended in all his centuries. Had there ever been another wedding where the father of the bride had to be pulled literally out of a bottle, or where the maid of honor was a ship's computer and the best man also the celebrant? Oddities aside, it worked beautifully. Jester used the ship's medical laboratories to come up with an antidote for Slive's poison. It isn't perfect, Sugar Pop, she confessed, but it will enable Miriam to recover without having to suffer all of those nightmares. She's still going to be at risk from a second bite. Maybe not as much as Tico will be, but the chance that the second bite would be fatal is pretty high. Corda looked down at Miriam. She was sleeping peacefully now, her features just a bit flushed. I'm certain that she'll avoid being bitten at all costs, he said. I can't imagine that nightmare is a situation that one invites. When Tico was certain that Miriam was out of danger, he donned a freshly charged harness of bottled time and rode the flying carpet to bring out Ereboo. The blind trader's face was streaked with tears of relief when he was reunited with his daughter and her fiancé. Not knowing how Dwister would react to his prize being taken away from him, Tico and Miriam decided to be wed by the laws of the old Terran regional government. In this way, they would not bring Dwister's wrath down on any unwitting religious authority or justice of the peace. Corda brought the Jester just outside the pocket universe and then, in his capacity as captain of the ship, performed the wedding service. The bride and groom decided to forego their honeymoon until Corda was done with his work and Aurans was out of stasis. Instead, they pledged their assistance to Corda. Although a part of him wanted to have any civilians out of the way, Corda could not deny that he needed their help. He set course to refuel the Jester, then, after the wedding breakfast had been cleared away, he poured a final cup of coffee and put his mind to work. Tell me what you can about Sheik Dwister, he said to his 3 Aranzan allies. Anything at all, no matter how insignificant. It may help me deduce the manner in which he would have a world key hidden. Why does that matter? Jester asked. For the wedding, she had appeared in an even more elaborate version of her Arabian Nights costume, complete with a gold ring in her navel and a band of polished coins across her forehead. For this conference, she had reverted back to her standard Jester's garb. Didn't Nizim Rokhtar do the hiding of the world key, the way Charlie Bell did in Herbs? Corda nodded approvingly. The answer is yes and no. Yes, Nizim Rokhtar would have done the mechanics, but I suspect that on Aurans, as on Herbs, some of the details of the design would have been dictated by the purchaser, in this case by Dwister. Silence fell as each of those present mulled over Corda's request. Ereboo broke the silence first.
I was not born on Aurans. The universe was first opened to emigrants when I was a man in my 20s. A new universe is a good market for a merchant. I liked the idea of being able to work in a place where the rules had yet to be fixed, so I came to Aurans. At that time, the planet open for habitation was Aurans itself. Haring, although more Earth-like in its range of climates and temperate zones, was not offered as an option. This made many turn away, but I was fascinated by what I learned of Aurans' deserts, beasts, and magics. I came looking for a job, and I found a home.
Arabu paused and felt around the table for his juice glass. With silent courtesy, Miriam put it in his hand and closed his fingers around it. After he had drunk, the blind man continued.
In those early days, Twister himself was still interviewing those who would colonize his universe. I was struck by his strange, untouchable charisma. This was a man who could lead armies, who most certainly had led troops of some sort, but those who followed his banner might never know why they followed him with such devotion. I was granted my entry visa, told the rules of trade, and permitted to bring in trade goods from Universe Prime. I was even invited to attend a biannual trade conference to help shape how Aurans would develop. I did so, and at those meetings I learned something about Sheik Twister that I found frightening.
The old trader's voice fell as if, even outside the universe of Aurans, Twister might hear his words. Around the table, the others leaned forward.
There is no pity in Twister. A blind man learns to recognize pity in its kinder sister, compassion. Twister feels pity for no one at all, not even for himself. And without pity he cannot grant mercy, nor give compassion, nor love either. He cannot understand the need to assist those in need. He understands laws and limits and even something of loyalty, but he does not feel pity.
Corda shuddered. Aurans, despite its blazing twin suns, suddenly seemed like a very cold universe. Across the table, Tico slipped his hand around Miriam's shoulders and hugged her close. She touched her husband's beard gently with her fingertips, a tiny, private embrace. Then she spoke. My memories of Sheik Twister were not as old as those of my father, the newly-wed bride said in hushed tones. Yet I was born beneath the sister suns, and something of the pulse of Twister's universe is knotted into my blood and bone. Before my mother died a few years ago, she was the center of a circle of weaver women who met at our house to knot both carpets and stories. On the holopad, Jester raised a hand for attention. Wait a second. I thought that you said that you didn't have a house. Miriam's pretty face became tinted with sorrow. Father and I sold the house after Mother's death. It was too haunted by her presence. We preferred to wander from bazaar to bazaar. Right, Jester fidgeted a little uncomfortably. There is no need to feel awkward or sad, little electronic imp.
There is no need to feel awkward or sad, little electronic imp, Tico said. Now Miriam and her father both have a home with me.
Jester beamed at him. You are a nice man, Tico, even if you are impulsive. Tico blushed. Let my dear lady tell on, Jester. Miriam picked up the thread of her story. Always, the weaver's gossip would turn to matters of the heart, marriages, divorces, betrothals. One piece of news would always stir the weavers into great debate, and this was the news that Sheik Twister had chosen to take another woman into his harem. The weavers were greatly divided as to whether this was an unparalleled honor or a tragedy. Often whether the girl had given her heart elsewhere would decide the question, but others were certain that even an unattached girl could have no more horrid fate than entering Twister's harem. Miriam wove a lattice out of her fingers. Some said that the harem women were given the finest medical care, including drugs that preserved their youth and beauty. They had no other work than tending to Sheik Twister, and, as she seemed indifferent to the rivalries and favoritism of the harem, this was not a difficult task. Some friends of my mother, those who had worked hard beneath the suns all their lives, and had seen their beauty shrivel in the heat, thought that the harem girls had a fine life. Others argued, however, that the harem women had empty lives. They were not permitted to bear children, for Twister wants no rivals to his power. Then entertainments were the simplest and the most frivolous, so their minds ceased to grow. One woman, a friend of my aunt, told us how her sister had been taken into Twister's harem. Twice a year the sister was permitted to visit her family. With each year that passed, although she stayed young and beautiful, the sister became more and more vacuous until the family felt as if a ghost with their kinswoman's face visited them. When she failed to visit them for over a year, no one noticed, and when at last they inquired after her from a representative of the palace, they were told that she had slipped in a bath and drowned. "Geez," Jester said when Miriam fell silent. "I'm awfully glad you were rescued from that." Miriam smiled, something of her vivacity returning as she hugged Tico. "So am I, Jester. So am I." Corda made a few thoughtful notes on a notebook with a light pencil. What he was learning had convinced him that access to the World Key would be hidden within the palace. An untrusting man like Twister would not put the key to his universe in any less secure place. Tico waited until Corda finished writing before offering his own anecdote.
As a member of Twister's inner circle, I learned many things about our supreme ruler that others might only suspect. Twister is a strange man. Sometimes he is so aloof that one could suspect that, as Arabu said, he feels nothing for anyone.
Arabu raised a finger in protest.
I said that he felt no pity, and that I thought he could not feel any of the caring emotions without that insight into another's need. I am not contradicting you, father-in-law, Tico said. I only bring up your point to show the contrast to another facet of Twister's personality. Very well. Speak on, son,
Arabu said.
Sheik Twister would often leave the palace and his comforts to go out among his people in the guise of one of them, Tico said. His chamberlain told me that Twister's favorite costume was that of a desert nomad. In those robes he would join one of their caravans, claiming to be from another tribe. He would stay with them, listening to their talk, hunting the fierce Keter beasts, and then vanishing again.
Was he spying? Jester asked. Tico spread his hands in a wide, eloquent gesture of puzzlement.
I do not know, Impling, he said. For a time I believed this was the case and made a study of the nomads. My research taught me that they live in a culture of their own. They view the cities as useful places to buy manufactured goods, but they do not pay any attention to politics or causes. In many ways they are like the gypsies of Old Terra, a people within a people, exclusive to themselves.
Miria stirred from her listening silence. So Sheik Twister could not learn much from them, could he?
Not unless he set them to find specific information for him. I began to believe that Sheik Twister used his time with the desert nomads as a vacation, a time when no one knew him and nothing was expected of him, so he could not earn with his own personal strengths.
Corda made a note and then turned to Tico. Did Sheik Twister ever leave the universe of Aurans? Tico nodded.
Yes, he had several trips he made each standard year. Once a year, he went to the pocket universe of Fortuna to enter his racing camels in the Camel Derby. Aurans has several large prize races each year, all for the purpose of helping Twister select those camels he would take with him to Fortuna. It is a great honor to be selected, and a winning breeder or trainer becomes an Auransan hero.
Camel races, Jester muttered. That's really weird. Miriam shook her head. Not at all, Jester. The racing camel is a beautiful sight, and since the races incorporate endurance trials as well as speed, they are fine and vital beasts. Corda wrote, Racing camels, Fortuna. Then an idea occurred to him. Jester, check the notes we had from the Terran regional representative. If I remember correctly, both Fortuna and the place Tico mentioned earlier, Verdry, are among the universes commissioned by God's pockets. Jester made a show of checking in a vast file cabinet, although of course the information had been ready since Corda framed his question. You got it, Sugar Pop, she said, slamming a file drawer shut. It seems that the owners of these universes and the mysterious financiers of God's pockets might be one and the same. The three Auransan guests looked puzzled, but they were too courteous to pry. Rubbing his hands together, Corda turned to Tico. As one of Sheik Twister's ministers of trade, would you happen to know other places where Aurans did business? Tico scratched one eyebrow. Herbs and Universe Prime, of course. Some with Fortuna, almost all export. Fortuna manufactures little but opportunities for games. We are also members in a certain trade nexus for pocket universes. The nexus is something of a clearinghouse that allows representatives of pocket universes to meet and do business without giving away the locations of their home universes. That is all I can think of from the official end. Arabu, Corda said, is there anything that your murmurs in the bazaar have hinted?
Last Cyber Soul, I heard something. Give me a moment to remember the details. Is there any more of this excellent mango nectar?
Plenty, Chester assured him. I'll have the dispenser fill you a glass. Ice?
Please.
He sat in meditation for several minutes, sipping his juice. At last he spoke a single cryptic phrase.
Silicon chips and electronic hardware.
The blind man pushed his juice glass from him.
Are you all familiar with the holiday of Cyber Soul?
You bet I am, said Chester. For once her hologram's cute features wore a serious expression. It's a celebration recognizing the unique spiritual nature of intelligent machines. I celebrate it every standard year, and the boss gives me flowers. Corda shrugged, almost embarrassed. Well, she is a lady, or she thinks she is, which is good enough for me.
On Aurans, Arabu said, we also celebrate Cyber Soul, along with Ael's Faith. It is one of our two most important spiritual observances. Last Cyber Soul, I went to a party held by CHRONOMASTER, the very talented android accountant who handles my records. As might be expected, given the holiday and the host, the majority of the guests were not flesh and blood people. There were many androids and computers, as well as cyborgs and normal people like myself. My blindness became a topic of conversation. Many of the guests could not believe that with cyborg enhancements available, I chose to remain without sight. The debate was fascinating, with some arguing that artificial sight could not be anything like real sight, and others, especially some computers, arguing heatedly that, as the analogs were identical, there would be no difference. A few of the cyborgs who had experienced both got embroiled in a heated argument, with some holding that their enhanced sight was better and others not. I may seem to stray from the topic, but as this argument threatened to become more than verbal, CHRONOMASTER said,
It really is a moot point at this moment. Even if Arabu wanted to try artificial sight, there has been such a run on parts that I doubt he could get eyes.
Corda made a note. That is very interesting. Do continue, Arabu. Arabu cleared his throat.
Many of those attending Cho's Cyber Soul party were in trade. They told story after story about peculiarities of the current electronics business. Those in manufacturing recounted how their entire production lines had been purchased by mysterious agents they had never met before. Those in sales told of having their entire line bought out and then being unable to purchase more because the manufacturers were working full speed on another order. After the party, I did some quiet research and learned that the stories were true. But I had no luck finding out who the purchaser was. Then, about 2 months after it had started, the rush ended. A few businesses were ruined, a few more profited. That was that.
Miriam stretched and then rose to refill her father's glass with mango nectar. When she returned to the table, she looked at the serious faces of the 3 Auran men. You all think that Sheik Twister was the mysterious purchaser, don't you? She asked. Why does that trouble you so much? Isn't one of the reasons for having a private universe to be able to get whatever you want and not answer questions?
Precisely, Tico said. My love is as brilliant as she is beautiful. Truly, Allah has blessed me. Only Twister could have made those purchases without official comment, but Twister would not have needed to make them in secret. The charter that every immigrant signs on taking up residency and every born citizen signs on achieving adulthood acknowledges that we are here on Twister's sufferance. How could he have commandeered what he wanted? Why didn't he?
Arabu rubbed his temples.
I don't know, my son, and not knowing makes my head ache. Twister has commandeered the fruits of private enterprise in the past. Twice, to my knowledge, he has borrowed starships, so to speak, once merely to transport racing camels to Fortuna. I know stories of his taking other less obvious things that have caught his fancy.
Like women for his harem? Jester said innocently. Arabu did not rise to the bait, but continued rubbing his temples. Corda glanced over his notes.
From what I see here, the only reason for Sheik Twister to hide the acquisition of large quantities of electronic parts is that he did not want it known that what he was doing. The only reasons I can see for that are either that he wanted the stuff for some secret project, or that he was afraid someone would learn he was stockpiling electronics, and that the knowledge would in some way hurt him.
Jester twirled on her holopad. Boss, I'm not sure I followed that. Corda grinned. It was convoluted. Fine, let's take it a step at a time. Has there been any construction that you know of anywhere within the universe of Aurans that would justify Twister needing so many raw electronic parts? Two heads shook, and Tico said,
No, not that I have heard. And the Minister for Internal Development is one of my closest friends. She and I play poker once a week and trade inside stories. I'm certain she would have said something.
Then, Corda said, either the construction is so secret that even the Minister for Internal Development knows nothing of it.
I think that's unlikely, Tico interrupted. She's a cyborg and a hacker. She makes it her business to know even what she's not supposed to know.
Or, Corda continued with an appreciative nod, Twister was acquiring those electronic parts for someone else, someone he does not want anyone to know he is associated with, possibly someone of whom he is afraid.
Afraid? Sheik Twister?
Miriam's laughter pealed like bells.
I may not have wanted to be in his harem, but I will defend him on this. The man wrestles Keter beasts for fun, duels with experts, and wins. His courage is beyond question.
Tico patted her hand.
I agree, my pretty whirlwind, that in normal things, Sheik Twister's courage is beyond question, beyond even comment. We of Aurans accept his courage as we do sand and sunlight.
As omnipresent annoyances? Jester quipped. Tico smiled briefly.
Yet there was a day when I was at the palace that I could swear that I saw Sheik Twister as cowed as a gerbil faced by a cobra.
Tico paused, filled his glass with ice water, and then, since there were no questions, he went on.
I was attending a meeting of the senior ministers of Aurans. Sheik Twister was attending this meeting, listening, commenting, but not presiding. This was his habit. Partway through the meeting, a message was brought to him. Sheik Twister paled beneath his tan. Even the whites of his eyes seemed to become whiter.
Tico, you're exaggerating, Miriam chided softly.
Perhaps a small amount,
Tico said, pressing his fingers together to show how slight the exaggeration was.
I have never seen a man so cowed. Twister rose without comment, left the room, and did not return. When next I saw him, he seemed normal, but for days I watched the heavens expecting some nameless catastrophe of cosmic proportions, for I had come to believe that only that would make Sheik Twister afraid.
Corda glanced at his notes. Tico, do you recall who brought the message? It could have been a clue about the saboteur. If I could speak to the messenger...
Yes, I understand. Let me think. It was not one of the usual runners. It was Slive.
Slive? Corda said. The tarantula?
Yes. I am sure of that because the sight of that monster always made me uneasy, and I wondered why it had come into our meeting.
Why didn't Slive just telepathically contact Twister if it wanted him? Said Jester.
The message was hard copy. A small glass disc. As for a reader, I doubt the spider can read.
How long ago was this? Corda asked.
Quite a while ago. At least 3/4 of a standard year. Right before, Arabu said thoughtfully, the runner on the electronic equipment. How very, very interesting. Yes, he began on electric equipment.
Corda glanced back over his notes. We've strayed quite away from the question of how Sheik Dwister might hide his world key, but I think we've got some interesting stuff here. Dwister seems to be dealing with at least 3 other God's Pockets universes, Herbs Fortuna and Verdry. Although usually fearless, even cold, there is someone or something Dwister fears enough that he pales when a message arrives, even before he has a chance to read that message. This person or thing may have enough leverage over him to force him to secretly disrupt his own economy. Miriam spread her hands. But is this the person he fears the same who shut off the universe, or someone else? What could an absolute ruler of a universe fear? Corda turned off his notebook. I don't know. To be honest, I'm not certain I want to find out, but I have a terrible suspicion that I just might before this is all over.